So today I'm going to talk to you a little bit about a subject that's been in the news a lot recently over the past couple of years. We are all very much aware of this subject. We've all either been talked to about it, some of us may have been scolded this. And that subject is texting and driving, or using your cell phone or smartphone behind the wheel of a motor vehicle. It's a subject that is pretty relevant to the material of the course and to the younger generation as a whole. And we'll start off just by a show of hands. So just out of curiosity, raise your hand if anyone in the room has ever used, looked at, or taken your eyes off of the road for any reason while operating a motor vehicle to look at your cell phone or smartphone. I definitely have. I'm definitely guilty of it. And it's something that is growing in popularity. More and more people are doing it. I try not to, but I still find myself kind of gazing down, checking to see if I've received a message, looking to see what my Facebook updates are on my iPhone, seeing if I have any phone calls, making phone calls kind of thing. And I find myself doing it more and more as I become more comfortable using the smartphone. And it wouldn't surprise me if every single person in the room was raising their hand because they have at one point looked at their phone while they were driving. So McKinsey & Company facilitated a survey where of 2,000 drivers asked, they found that 33%, or 1/3 of these 2,000 drivers, were guilty or fessed up to using their cell phone or smartphone behind the wheel of a motor vehicle. And the way that this 1/3 was broken down was 89% of the people who fessed up to using their cell phones use their cell phones to make phone calls. 68% of these people use their cell phones for navigational purposes, 39% for messaging, text messaging, etc., and 31% for social media and emailing. The study done by McKinsey & Company also found that the majority of the culprits using their cell phones behind the wheel of a car were under 40 years old. So 55% of all people who admitted to using their cell phone or smartphone behind the wheel of a motor vehicle were between the ages of 18 and 40 years old, whereas just 27% of that same group were between the ages of 40 and 69 years old. This is mostly because we've grown up in such a technological era where we feel so comfortable with the technology that has been incorporated and so intertwined into our everyday lives that we don't think twice before turning to that technology, even in situations where we shouldn't, such as driving. So needless to say, this has become a very big social norm. CNN recently published an article where this issue of texting and driving, or using your cell phone and driving, was completely overlooked. The article is titled 10 Smartphone Habits You Should Avoid. So according to CNN, the top 10 smartphone habits that should be avoided at all times, at all costs, are 1. Drunk texting, tweeting, or Instagramming. 2. Fooling around on your cell phone whenever you have a spare moment. 3. Passive-aggressively whining for the world to see. 4. Being scared to use the phone. And then the article goes into talking about how so many times in today's day and age, there are so many other ways to contact people with all the apps available that we don't necessarily need to use the actual phone, let alone our voices, to have a conversation with someone miles away. 5. Missing your favorite band's concert because you're too busy taking crappy photos. 6. Texting scandalous pictures. 7. Turning your friends into enemies with videos of them. 8. Letting your seething anger leak out to the world at large. 9. Texting and walking. And 10. Using your phone in the bathroom. You'll notice that of those 10 things, none of them mention using your phone behind the wheel of a motor vehicle or while operating heavy machinery. And I think that that's something that should be mentioned as number 1, and instead it's completely disregarded and overlooked. Now, as I said before, this has become completely a social norm. You might say, well, my friends do it, my brother does it, my parents might do it, why can't I do it? I might as well, jump on the bandwagon kind of thing. But we all know that there's a risk associated with doing it, but yet we do it anyways. So How do we discourage people from doing something they shouldn't when there are so many people on board with putting themselves and others at risk? And there's power in numbers. There's only so much that individuals can do. There needs to be a group uprise to counteract this new social norm. It's kind of like the Mothers Against Drunk Driving years ago. It kind of seems to be repeating itself today with texting.
Unfortunately, the issue of texting and driving isn't really something that hits home with a lot of people until they've lived it. And I'm going to share with you my story today and a little bit of why I felt so passionate to talk about this growing subject. I've actually been involved in 2 texting and driving related accidents. The first one happened in the winter of 2009. I was actually in the passenger seat of my friend's car. He was driving with his knees with both hands he was using both hands to text practically. I was also texting, not paying attention to the road. I was in the passenger seat. And what happened was we hit a pothole and spun out, and essentially he lost control of the car. We hit a tree. The car was totaled. We were really lucky not to have done harm to ourselves, not to have done harm to others. The worst that came out of this scenario was the fact that his car was completely totaled and unrepairable. The second texting and driving accident that I was related in happened in the spring of 2011. This time I was a driver. I was driving alone, and I had ended up being rear-ended on the highway. What happened was essentially traffic came to a very quick standstill, and once I made a stop, I heard screeching brakes, looked up, and realized that the driver behind me wasn't stopping in time and was going to hit me, so I had to brace for impact. It later came out that this driver was in fact texting, and that's why he didn't see my brake lights when I had began stopping several hundred yards before I came to a complete halt. Again, I was really lucky that no serious damage happened. No one was hurt. No one was killed. The only 2 cars involved in the accident were mine and the other person's. And it all worked out in our favor, but it was enough to scare me to not want to touch my phone while I'm behind the wheel of a motor vehicle. It doesn't always work out that everyone involved in a car accident walks away unharmed without a scratch, especially when it involves texting and driving. Albeit accidents do happen. Sometimes it involves eating, sometimes it involves distraction by other drivers, sometimes it involves distraction from other passengers. But we need to do what we can to avoid putting ourselves in danger. And utilizing this technology behind the wheel of a car is just feeding into the possibility of having an on-road collision. Statistics show that 23% of all yearly automobile accidents have to do with a cell phone in one way, shape, or form. This includes texting, dialing, talking or listening, or reaching for your device. People who text behind the wheel are 23 times more likely to get into a crash than using your cell phone for any other purpose. Dialing makes it 2.8 times more likely that you'll get into an accident. Talking and listening, 1.3 times more likely. Or reaching for your device makes it 1.4 times more likely to be in an accident. Texting and driving outweighs these by far. The way teens are justifying their texting and driving habits now are making excuses by saying that reading a text is safer than composing and sending a text, or they may hold the phone near the windshield for better visibility, or they increase following distance, or they text only at a stop sign or a red light. But what happens the one time that you look down at your cell phone a little too long? What happens the one time that you get a little too into the paragraph that you're sending your friend about your plans for tonight? Call it immaturity, call it the theory of invincibility that we see so many times with teenagers in high school and college. The fact of the matter is that people die from this. People get severely injured, and people cause a lot of pain for stupid mistakes. When texting and driving, you're not just putting yourself at risk. The consequences that can arise from using your phone behind the wheel of a car can have a rippling effect. If you get into a collision with another car and kill someone in that vehicle or kill someone in your own vehicle, you could potentially rip apart your family or somebody else's. People have been tried and convicted for involuntary manslaughter because they were texting behind the wheel of their car. People have gone to jail for it. When someone says to you not to text and drive, it's not because that's what they're supposed to say. They're telling you that for your best interest. So what do we do about this? How do we get people to stop texting and driving?
One way to go about doing this is to raise awareness. There are countless spots, ads, and commercials that have been put out by so many different companies trying to get the word out there, trying to get young people to realize that using their cell phones behind the wheel, texting and driving, is putting people at risk. It's essentially putting yourself at risk. And these companies are trying to get students and young people to kind of wake up and realize that what they're doing is not safe, and they're trying to really advocate for safe decision making.
We've all seen the commercials that start off by showing a sign or a person saying, "This is the last text that I ever sent to my sister or friend or mother or whomever it may be," that opened up the text and was responding to that person while driving. The commercials then always cut to pictures of a wrecked car, pictures of people crying, and pictures of gravestones. These commercials really hit home for me, especially given my 2 close call accidents. Whenever I see these commercials, I always YouTube them and send them to any of my friends who I know text and drive. It doesn't necessarily mean that they're going to listen to me or heed my warning, although I hope that they would, but it just means that I'm doing my part in trying to get them to be a little safer with themselves. Recently, there have been a few organizations that have stood up against this rising phenomenon. Organizations that really care and want to influence good decision making.
So one website called stopthetextstoptherex.org actually publishes facts, tips, and other things about young people texting and driving, or tweeting and driving, or just using your cell phone in general while operating the heavy machinery. The facts that stopthetextstoptherex.org puts out are: fact number 1, 5 seconds is the average time your eyes are off the road while texting. When traveling at 55 miles an hour, that's enough time to cover the length of a football field. Fact number 2, a texting driver is 23 times more likely to get into an accident than non-texting drivers. Fact number 3, of those killed in distracted driving-related crashes, 995 involved reports of a cell phone as a distraction, 18% of fatalities in distracted-related crashes. As I said before, stopthetextstoptherex.org also puts out tips, aside from just the facts, to kind of assist people to break away from their habits of using their cell phones behind the wheel. Just trying to make them more aware that, oh geez, I am looking down right now, I need to stare at the road. And those facts are: tip number 1, out of sight, out of mind. So put your cell phone somewhere you won't be able to reach it, somewhere you're not going to feel the need to go grabbing it. Tip number 2, silence is golden. Turning your cell phone on silent mode, not even vibrate, so you're unaware of your incoming texts and phone calls, is one of the best decisions you can make while driving. Tip number 3, find your app. If you have an application that plays music or something that you need to use while driving, such as a navigation system, set it up beforehand. And tip number 4, designate a texter. If you have a passenger that you can hand your cell phone to and they can read what the person who's texting you is writing and possibly respond on your behalf, that is one of the best scenarios you can find yourself in a case where you feel that you have to respond right away. AT&T is another company who launched a campaign against texting on board. And this campaign is called It Can Wait. You can find it at itcanwait.com. And AT&T really launched this campaign to educate people, especially teenagers, of the dangers of texting and driving, of the dangers of dialing and driving, or using your phone in general behind the wheel of a car. And each pledge is a symbol of commitment to make safe choices, is the way that they're campaigning themselves. Pledges can be made via social media sites such as Facebook and Twitter, and it's been doing very well. It Can Wait also features texts every week on their website of people making their pledge. So on Twitter you might write down your story, or just simply, I pledge not to be texting and driving, I pledge to make safe decisions, and then you tweet at It Can Wait, or you hashtag It Can Wait. And there are many people sharing their stories, as I said, tons of people making the pledge, and I think that it's a very good way for a company, or a company who is a mobile provider, to raise awareness to their customers and other people about this type of danger. Another way to change social norms, obviously, is by cracking down on the law. This means that police officers and other law enforcement need to be more vigilant of pulling people over who they see are on their cell phones, maybe looking down, perhaps texting, or doing other mobile data sharing behind the wheel of a car. That being said, it's pretty difficult for law enforcement to stop someone from texting or pull someone over because they feel that they're texting. How do they know that they're texting for sure? They could be changing the song on the radio, they could be finagling with their iPod that is connected to their stereo. There's a number of things that drivers could be doing that are not necessarily texting, but are still not looking or paying full attention to the road in front of them. So how far do we take it? And there are a number of states who have banned all electronics and all cell phone device usage. Take a look at the map of the United States broken down by laws of texting and driving, or laws of cell phone usage and driving. The green states have banned texting to all drivers and all users. The blue states have partially banned texting and driving and using your cell phone and driving behind the wheel. The blue mostly consists of people who have their learner's permit and individuals under the age of 21 years old. And finally, the pink states have no ban and no restrictions as far as texting, driving, and talking and driving goes. In conclusion, we're basically all aware of the dangers of texting and driving or using your cell phone in general while operating a motor vehicle. The problem is that it's become such a social norm, and our lives are so intertwined with our technology that we either A, don't notice that we're doing it, or B, have just been so taken by this new wave of social normality where we find it acceptable to put people and ourselves at danger or at risk, that we've just kind of conformed. And that's a social norm that needs to be changed. And the only way to change social norms is to kind of make an uprise together, band together, talk to your friends, talk to your family. If you're in the car and you see someone looking at their cell phone or dialing a phone number, sending a text message, speak up, say something. You don't want to be that person in a car accident because the driver was being irresponsible and not paying attention to the road. The only way to change social norms depends on us.